he says, ye have broken faith, you've married foreign women to increase the guilt of Israel. Now therefore make confession unto the Lord, the God of your fathers, and do his pleasure, and separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from the foreign women. You know, we think that maybe intermarriage is just a thing today. Intermarriage was a problem even in the time of Ezra, and he's saying, stop marrying foreign women. And the second critical read of the book of Ruth is that it might have come along as a polemic against Ezra, as a response to him. Ezra, you think foreign women are so bad? Well, if it wasn't for foreign women and our ability to marry them, especially a Moabite, like Moabite is the worst. If it wasn't for this foreign woman, we would have no King David. So this is the second critical read. So look at what we're going to talk about in 2 sessions from now with Rabbi Sachs. We already have some really interesting things to talk about. This book as a book about good deeds, maybe that's its purpose. Maybe it's about intermarriage. Or maybe the book is about correcting false narratives and fake news, how to make fake news in the world. Interesting topics that critical scholars say this might be the origin of the book of Ruth. But we're going to spend most of our time in this class talking about the reading of a scholar named Yochi Brandis on the book of Ruth. And she says that this might be a polemic, but not the polemic that we were thinking about, not against intermarriage. This is a polemic against the patriarchy. This is a book about women, for women. It's meant to address the needs of women, paint a different picture of women in a patriarchal society. And I want to present this interpretation to you. I want to submit it to you for your consideration to think about. I don't know if any of you have looked at the book in particular as a book that is speaking to a patriarchal society and trying as women to say, don't forget about us. So let's delve right in. I'm going to show you now Robert Alter's. This is a full service Zoom course. You get not only a teacher, you get the script as well. No printing. Give me a thumbs up if you can see Robert Alter's English translation of the book of Ruth. One of the most fascinating things about the book of Ruth is the absence of men. They are not really there. They show up, but they either die very quickly, they exit the scene very early on, or they exist for maybe 1 or 2 verses. This is extraordinary. In the Hebrew Bible, women never exist on their own. There are maybe a couple of examples you can think of in the Bible where stories of women are told. I'm thinking in particular of Moses's birth. You know, the stories of the women who saved, the nursing women who saved Moses. That's maybe one exception to the rule. But for the most part, all the women whose stories are told in the Bible, their stories are told because they relate to some man. They're someone's wife. They were raped by someone else. They are there to serve the interests of a warrior. But to have an independent story of women is truly remarkable. And not just that, to have a book with an independent story of women and no men almost at all. Even Boaz, who we're going to see as the most well-developed male character in the book, he's not one of the main characters. He shows up, he's important, but I wouldn't call him, when you're writing a script and you decide who gets the lead role, I don't even think Boaz gets the lead. This is a book about women. And what's interesting is it opens up with a costume on. It is disguised as a book about men. And what Yochi Brandis says is this disguise, the costume it's wearing, and I'll explain to you in a second what that costume is. This is evidence that it is a book that is out there to speak up for the existence of women in a patriarchal society. It uses language and words that are stolen from the patriarchy and applies them to women to subvert. So I'm going to need a reader today who's going to help me. Who's got a good voice of a narrator? Sheila, can I pick on you, Sheila Saltzman?
The only problem is that it's very small on my screen.
Can I try something? Is this bigger and better?
Oh, okay. So chapter much better.
All right, Sheila, you're not going to be the voice of God, but you will be the voice of the narrator. Can we do that?
So it's chapter 1 here?
We're starting from the beginning. Let's delve right in. Are you okay, Sheila, with me interrupting you? I'm going to interrupt you several times.
Sure.
Okay.
And it happened in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a man went from Bethlehem to sojourn in the plains of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons.
All right, so let me stop you there. This story begins like a good biblical book should begin. Once upon a time, there was a man, right? This is what Yochi Brandis says is the disguise. Even though this is a story about women, it starts off, this is the costume. It starts off saying, here's a story about a man. He and his wife and his 2 sons. There's one woman, but she's referred to as his wife. In other words, almost his property. And his 2 sons. Let's just pause for a second there and remember that all the genealogies in the Bible, whenever the Bible gives a genealogy, and this one begat that one and begat that one and begat that one, has anyone ever seen a woman included on that list? No. Women are not included in genealogical accounts. In every story in the Bible where a woman is infertile, does she ever give birth to a woman? Never. It's for a miracle, I prayed to God for a miracle and he gave me a girl. Like, it's almost a disappointment. I mean, if God's going to perform a miracle, he's going to go 100% and give me a male. So we don't have origin stories about many women in the Bible. They open up in a similar way to this. Here's a man, here's his 2 sons. But things are going to change for that family very quickly. Sheila, if you could read the next verse.
Sure. And the man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion.
Yep.
Ephratites from Bethlehem of Judah. And they came to the plains of Moab, and there they were.
Once upon a time there was a man, he had a wife and 2 sons, and of course as a wife she went along with him wherever he went, because that's what a good wife does, and they ended up in the plains of Moab. So far, this is a book that fits very well in the scheme of the Bible, right? Not surprising. Keep going, Sheila.
And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she, together with her 2 sons, was left. And they took for themselves Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there some 10 years. And the two of them, Mahlon and Chilion, died as well. And the woman was left of her two children and of her husband.
Oh, I wanted to tell you a story about men. I really wanted to tell you the story about men. But whoops, they all died. We didn't expect it. And guess what we're stuck with? There are no men left within 4 verses. Excuse me, is it 3 verses? Yeah, 3 verses. I wanted to tell you a story about men, but look at the cunning way that the story completely changes course. Now we're stuck not just with women, we're only women. There are only women left on the scene. The story, think about it. It could have started off uh, just talking about women, but it probably wouldn't have made its way into the Bible if that's how it began the story. It has to use the general theme of biblical stories, which here's a man, this is where he was, and he had sons, very familiar, a man with sons, with a wife and sons. And then it totally changes course. And we now have an incredible story, totally unique, about women left all alone. Sheila, where are we? Verse
6.
6.
And
Okay.
rose.
And she rose.
Uh,
Right here where I'm pointing. And she rose,
yeah.
she and her daughters-in-law.
And her daughters-in-law, and turned back from the plains of Moab, for she had heard in the plains of Moab that the Lord had singled out his people to give them bread. And she went out from the place where she had been with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to go back to the land of Judah.
So listen, she does not have any men left to take care of her. And it's important that we understand that this puts her in a very vulnerable position in the times of the Bible. In a patriarchal world, a widow without any sons, that is the lowest of the low. Uh, you you are basically, as a young girl, your father is worried for you as you grow up. You should find a husband and you should have sons. That's how you're going to be secured in the world. Naomi lost everything. There is no one left to take care of her. And in Moab, there's nothing for her, so she decides to go home. In Judah also, there's nobody left for her, but at least she won't be a foreigner. At least she'll be among her people, and maybe she'll find some sympathy there. So it was really an economic reason, wouldn't you say, that she decides to go back to Judah? Um, there was some hope there that she would be able to take care of herself. But you see that what does she want for her daughters-in-law? If you see very clearly, it says she wanted them to go back. Let's read verse 8, Sheila.
And Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord do kindness with you as you have done with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that you find a settled place, each of you in the house of her husband." And she kissed them, and they raised their voice and wept. And they said to her, "But with you we will go back to your people." And Naomi said, "Go back, my daughters. Why should you go with me?"
Okay, so is it okay if I stop you there, Sheila? Ruth and Orpah are in a different situation than Naomi. Remember that. Naomi, her life is done. No more husband, no more male children. She's too old to have kids, presumably, at this stage in her life. But Ruth and Orpah, they can save themselves, but they can't save themselves in Judah. If you come to Judah, you will be in the lowest rank of society that there will be. You'll be poor, widowers, and no children. And not only that, uh, your foreign women, Moabite women here, in addition to all the other troubles that we have, go home. No man in Judah will ever agree to marry a Moabite woman like you. I just want to highlight a very interesting word in verse 8. By the way, can you see where I have my hand, this little hand on the mouse? Oh, that's great. All right. This is a useful feature here. Go back, each of you, to her mother's house. The Hebrew is Beit Ima. If you had a highlighter, I would highlight those words. Why does Naomi say, go back to your mother's house? In most of the times in the Bible, it's your father's house, Beit Aviha. Go back to your father's house. But here, Yochi Brandis is saying, is another subversive act of the author against the patriarchy of the Bible. That should have said, go back to your father's house. But the author changed it. Beit Ima. We only find those words, Beit Ima, 2 other places in the Bible. Once with the book in the with the story of Rebecca, once in Shir Hashirim. But I think here it just sticks out. It's meant to stick out at you as another way of reinforcing this idea that this is a story that is changing all of the conventions, reversing the normal place of women in the Bible. These words are not just surprising because of that reversal there to house of your mother, but also because of what Naomi is saying. This goes back to that story of good deeds. Naomi should have said to their girls, right, stay with me, I've got nothing. If she was a self-interested woman, she would say, I'm going to be all alone without my daughters-in-law. Please don't leave me alone. But she doesn't. She has no inheritance, no husband, no children. And she still says to her daughters, I'm done, but you should save yourselves. Leave me alone, and you go to where you need to go to. Go to Beit Lechem, go back to Moab, and take care of yourselves. She's not thinking of herself and her own condition. And then you'll see in the next few verses, she also knows what Jews are like. And she says, you're not going to do well if you come with me. It's a totally selfless way of acting in this scene. And we should note that and be shocked by it in a way. And I think it just adds proof to this reading of the first reading that I introduced to you, that this is a book about people who are incredibly generous and kind and thoughtful to one another and put others first. Sheila, are
Sure.
we at may the Lord grant you?
No, further down between 11 and 12.
Okay, go ahead.
Do I still have sons in my womb? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Could be husbands to you? Go back, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. Even had I thought I have hope, this very night I shall have a husband and bear sons. Would you wait for them till they grew up? For them, would you be deprived of husbands?
This woman who should be saying, stay with me, is saying, leave. Keep going, Sheila, sorry.
No, my daughters, for it is far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has come out against me.
Okay, let's stop there. Do you see what she's saying about her people? Um, I'm just not, uh, in my world, in the world of Judah where I live, you guys are not going to do well. What happens now? Sheila, let's see. And they
raised their voice and wept once more. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. Go back after your sister-in-law." And Ruth said,
Okay, let's stop there before and Ruth said. I just want to say a word about the different names in the Bible. In this story, all the names here are allegorical, every single one. Boaz means strength, a man of strength. The husband's name, Machlon means sicky, as in ill. Kilion means destruction. Naomi you've heard of the word Noam. It's related to the word Noam. Noam means harmony. Orpah. If you remember in the Machzor on the high holidays, it says, we are so stiff-necked. Stiff-necked is kishay oref. Oref, stiff-necked. Orpah, neck. Why do you think they call her the neck? Because she turns her neck. She turns her back against Ruth, right? Excuse me, against Naomi, sorry. And Ruth reminds us of the word re'ut. Reish ayin vav taf for the Hebrew speakers in the group. Re'ut means friendship. Re'ut is partnership, companionship. Wow, what a perfect name. So all the names are allegorical. They're probably, I think it just adds evidence that this is a fairy tale. All the names have some subconscious meaning to them. And we're supposed to understand, based on their names, what comes of them in the story. So Orpah leaves. By the way, our sages, Chazal, the rabbis, they don't like Orpah. They say that Goliath, just like David came from Ruth, Goliath came from Orpah. But if you forget about their reading for a second, I don't know how you feel, but I totally understand. I don't think Orpah is being presented here in a negative light. Can I put it that way? She doesn't really want to leave, but Naomi is insisting. You're not going to do well if you come with me in Judah. Go save yourself. I just think she gives in to her mother-in-law's reasoning. That doesn't make her bad. She's in mourning. She's lost her husband. She's confused about what direction to follow for the rest of her life, and she listens to her mother-in-law. Ruth, on the other hand, is more stubborn in a way. She does not listen to her mother-in-law, even when her mother-in-law says, please follow your sister, your sister-in-law. Do what she did. Now here come the most beautiful words in the Hebrew Bible. If you've been sleeping through the whole first part of this lecture, just pay attention to the most beautiful words I think you will find in the Bible. Oh, wait, before I get that, I just want to make one comment. Sorry, but I love this scroll so much. I keep jumping around interesting things. Ruth clung to her. Do you see that? Ruth clung to her. The Hebrew, Verut davka ba. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it says, a man shall leave his father's house and cling v'davak beishto, and cling to his wife. The same exact word. Yochi Brandis says, attention, attention, subversive reading. This word that is supposed to be used to describe the relationship between a husband and wife is here being used to describe clinging. That's a strong word between a mother-in-law and her daughter-in-law. Ruth clung to her. If you printed this out, or if you want me to send you a copy, print this out, I'd say highlight that. The clinging. Okay, now, Sheila, moment of truth. Here are the words. And Ruth said,
do not entreat me to forsake you, to turn back from you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people is my people, and your God is my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. So may the Lord do to me, or even more, for only death will part you and me.
Stop there. It's very hard to read this verse and not just want to read it over and over and over again. It is the best line in the whole Bible. Please don't, I know some of you are thinking, oh, this is conversion, right? This is conversion. Your God should... Folks, that's what the rabbis did to this verse. They needed some verse to explain where conversion to Judaism comes from, and they pinned it on this. But this is not a verse about conversion to Judaism. It is a verse about two friends, two women who are devoted completely to each other. She's not fighting. You expect Ruth to say to her mother-in-law, don't worry, Naomi, I'll be fine in Judah. I'll find a husband. I'll be okay. That's what, again, the book of Gemilut Chasadim. Look at her devotion. You would expect her to say, listen, we can make this work together, I promise. She's not. She's saying, I'm going with you because I love you. Because wherever you go, I will go. Whatever you eat, I will eat. Whatever your destiny is, I will be there. Only death. I mean, can you imagine this? This is a woman who still has life ahead of her. This isn't even her mother. It's her mother-in-law. I will never, ever leave you. Wow. If the only thing that ever came out of this whole scroll was this verse describing this relationship, I would say, good enough. This is what makes it holy. You can read it over and over and over again. You will get goosebumps every time. Understand where they are, what their situation is. And you will say, this is what the rabbis are. This will just add evidence to the rabbinic reading. This is people who are they're in a fairy tale land where everyone is just good to each other. And they put themselves last and put the needs of the other first. Okay, Sheila, take a deep breath and move forward in the story.
And she saw that she was insisting on going with her, and she ceased speaking to her. And the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened as they came to Bethlehem that the whole town was astir over them. And the women said, is this Naomi? And she said, do not.
Let me skip down the page.
Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for Shaddai has dealt great bitterness to me. I went out full, and empty did the Lord bring me back. Why should you call me Naomi when the Lord has borne witness against me, and Shaddai has done me harm? And Naomi came back and her daughter-in-law with her, who was coming back from the plains of Moab. And they had come to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay, so that ends chapter 1. Now, listen, I did say everyone's nice in this book. If you want to find a little bit of nastiness, what do you think about, we don't have time to have the conversation. If we were together, we'd have the conversation, but I'll give it all for you to consider, of the comment that the women make when Naomi and Ruth come into Bethlehem. The town was astir over them. Okay, astir. What does that mean? They were astir. The women said, "Is this Naomi?" See, there's different ways of understanding, is this Naomi? You could say, is this Naomi? Oh, well, they're just being honest. They don't recognize her, but they were calling out to her in sympathy. Maybe. It could also be, yikes, look what happened to her. And they're talking behind her back. You know, she used to have it all. Elimelech was the guy to be with. We all thought he was going to be, they were going to have a wonderful life together, 2 great sons, wonderful husband, and look at her now. Look, even she buys into some of this pity when she says, look, don't even call me Naomi. Naomi means, remember, Naomi means Noam, pleasant. My life isn't pleasant now. Call me Mara. You know, this is further evidence that the names are allegorical. I don't even want you to call me by my name, which means pleasant. We're going to change my name to bitter, because my life now is bitter, and God has taken everything away from me. And there they were in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. We still have time. Do you guys want to move on? Are we okay to do chapter 2? You can always leave if you're not. You can leave inconspicuously. I won't even notice. Is everyone with me? Thumbs up if you're with me and you're enjoying and we're learning. Okay, great. Let me talk a little bit about Cinderella stories before we jump into chapter 2. These Cinderella stories are a favorite in the Bible. Think of Joseph. Everyone knows Cinderella, right? Here she was, Cinderella was a maid, and then, she ends up marrying a prince. Remember, this is a fairy tale, but it's a bit of a different fairy tale. Joseph how does he get to where how does he get to become vizier over Egypt, second to the Pharaoh? Well, because he's smart and he's creative and he has God's help, but he uses his own ingenuity. David, too, King David's story. King David is a shepherd. That's another Cinderella story in the Bible. But he's strong and he's courageous and he's a warrior. Who doesn't love Cinderella stories? Most of the women who succeed, think of Esther, like a Cinderella story like Esther. She succeeds for a different reason. Not necessarily because she's so smart, but because she's very pretty. And she marries, obviously, the prince. That's the typical Cinderella story. For a girl, it's not about achieving some position of power. The way a Cinderella story ends for a female character is she gets her prince. This prince is introduced to us in the first verse of chapter 2. Her prince, this is our Cinderella story, right? Ruth is our Cinderella, and her prince is Boaz. Sheila, you're doing such a great job. Would you mind helping us with chapter 2?
Sure. And Naomi had a kinsman through her husband, a man of worth from the clan of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz.
Okay, so I just want to say, Look at how he's described. How are most princes, when you think of a Cinderella story and you think of a prince in a Cinderella story, I think most of us think of a prince who's very handsome, who's very young. Um, that's not who Boaz is. Boaz is older, and it says he's a man of worth. He's old and he's rich. That's her prince. This tells us a little bit about the biblical view of what a prince ought to be versus Walt Disney. This is more of a I don't know. I think, one of the most famous Cinderella stories that I think of is Pretty Woman. You ever see Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts? That's like the greatest Cinderella story in our generation. And you see, well, he's youngish, at Richard Gere, and he's got a lot of money. Maybe that's who I think of as Boaz. An honored person in the community. In most of these Cinderella stories, the way they're told, there has to be some challenges on the way to get it for Cinderella to meet the prince. I mean, it can't just happen in a couple of verses. There's got to be a story. She's got to run into some trouble, right, on the way there. Maybe she meets a witch along the way, or some spell has to be casted. With Pretty Woman, remember, he had Jason Alexander I forget the name of the character he played in Pretty Woman, but remember his friend starts harassing Julia Roberts, and in the end she doesn't get, she breaks it off. And that's what makes the storyline interesting. In this story, there seems to be no delay. This happens right away that Ruth meets Boaz. So where's the excitement in this story? Where's the whole drama that's supposed to get us attuned and paying attention? Sheila, would you continue on verse 2?
And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go, pray, to the field, and glean from among the ears of grain after I find favor in his eyes." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." And she went and came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. And it chanced that she came upon the plot of Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. And look, Boaz was coming from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "May the Lord be with you." And they said, "May the Lord bless you." And Boaz said to his lad, who was stationed over the reapers, "Whose is this young woman?"
Let's stop there. So, wow, right away, they're meeting each other. There's no delay, there's no real difficulty, but I want us to pay attention here to why I think one can also make the argument that this story ends up in the Bible. If you remember the book of Esther, the whole theme of the book of Esther is God is hiding between the lines. There's a whole bunch of different circumstances, because it's also a book, it seems like a fairy tale. God isn't obviously there orchestrating events, but the major message of the book of Esther is, but there's no such thing as coincidences, right? God is making all of these things, piecing all these things together, and that's why the book of Esther belongs in the Bible, because that's the way God works in the world. We think there are coincidences, but really God's orchestrating everything. And that's what happens here. And the word that you should highlight is, it chanced that she came upon the plot of Boaz. We knew that there was this kinsman relationship between Ruth and Boaz. But imagine she just one day ends up, the first place she goes happens to be Boaz's field, the right guy. And not only that, but Boaz notices her. Imagine he happened to be there that day stationed over the reapers, and says, "Who is this young woman?" Okay, let's keep reading.
And the lad stationed over the reapers answered and said, "She is a young Moabite woman who has come back with Naomi from the plain of Moab." And she said, "Let me glean, pray, and gather from among the sheaves behind the reapers." And she has come and stood since the morning till now. She has barely stayed in the house. And Boaz said to Ruth, "Have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go to glean in another field, and also do not pass on from here, and so shall you cling to my young women."
By the way, pay attention to that "cling to my young women." He's saying, don't hang around with the guys. I don't really trust them around you. I want you, again, I want you to be in the company, in the comfort of the women who are part of my household. Again, subversive reading. Keep the women look after each other in this book. Boaz says, I heard uh, um, what you did. He says this to Ruth, and I want you to stick with me. Keep going, Sheila.
Your eyes be on the field in which they reap, and go after them. Have I not? Does it change?
Have I not charged the
Charge the lads not to touch you. Should you be thirsty, you shall go to the pitchers and drink from what the lads draw from the well.
Okay, let's stop there. Again, just this Prince Charming that Cinderella meets is a wonderful guy. Look at how much care and concern he has for her. I will protect you. You'll take everything that you need. I even told the lads not to touch you. Now, look at that verse. I told the lads not to touch you. What does that mean? The Bible is not a book that likes to call attention to the bad habits of Jews, that they are not behaving well. And it's not explicit here, because this verse isn't necessarily proof that there was sexual harassment going on Boaz's field. But it would help to point to the possibility, wouldn't it? I told them not to touch you because sometimes these guys get out of control, and I'm going to protect you. Again, that subversive reading. Sometimes men cannot be trusted, and women have to look out for themselves. And they create societies where women are alone and vulnerable in the field, and reapers can take advantage of them. Maybe that's, Yochi Brandis says for sure, those words are there on purpose, that I charge the lads not to touch you, because there was a harassment that was going on very often in the field, and Ruth would have had to be protected. Okay, Sheila, go ahead.
And she fell on her face and bowed to the ground and said to him, "Why should I find favor in your eyes to recognize me when I am a foreigner?"
Okay, so just stop there for a second. Ruth is shocked. No one's ever done anything so kind and nice to her before. Why do you recognize me? Now, pretend you didn't know this story. Everybody, pretend you didn't know this story. What do you expect the next line to be? Why do your eyes recognize me? I'm a foreigner. I'm the lowest of the low. If you ask me, the next line should be, because Ruth was beautiful. There's a whole bunch of people gleaming in the field. I could have been nice to all of them. I noticed you right away. I mean, typical guy. Why would he notice her right away? I mean, everything we know from the book of Esther, right? This is a Megillah, just like the scroll of Esther. Why was Esther noticed by Achashverosh? She's beautiful. Of course, Boaz would say, because you're you're the most beautiful girl in the whole field, and I'm worried about your safety and I want to protect you. But here's another line. Unless you know that that's what the text should have said, this next line would not be as powerful and resonant with you. So now, in that context, knowing that we expect him to say, because you're gorgeous, Sheila, let's read this line.
And Boaz answered and said, "It was indeed told me all that you did for your mother-in-law after your husband's death.
Wow. Okay, keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
And that you left your mother and your father and the land of your birth to come to a people that you did not know in time past."
So look what the answer is. I didn't notice you because you're beautiful. Folks, every story about a woman in the Bible is a story about how beautiful she is. It's always mentioned everywhere in the Bible. If there's a woman, she's beautiful. From Sarah, remember, Abraham can't even travel to Egypt. He's worried to travel to Egypt with Sarah because she's beautiful. All the matriarchs are beautiful. All the heroines of the Bible are gorgeous. Delilah. I mean, you go through the list. For the first time, at least in a most explicit way, sometimes it's not mentioned whether a woman is beautiful or not. Here it's not mentioned, but I think it's subversive, right? We expect him to say, because you're beautiful. But he doesn't say that. And Yochi Brandis, in her reading, she jumps on this verse and says, this is the proof that this is a story about fighting the patriarchy, right? It's such a modern thing. I can't even believe we have a biblical book about a theme that's so, that's in modern studies that hasn't even been accepted into some major universities in 2020. And yet back in the Bible, we have a book where a woman is being singled out, not because of how she looks, but because of who she is, because of the traits that are inside of her, because she is good, because she is selfless, because she is kind. I noticed you for something that I can't even see with my eyes, but because of a story that was told to me about what you did. What you did for your mother-in-law is so incredible to me. I want to take special care of you. We're going to stop there. We're going to stop there. I don't know how many of you have been convinced yet by Yochi Brandis's reading that this is really a story about women looking out for women. I think it's almost all of the above, right? I'm not even sure we can break the real purpose and message into the story down to one sentence. But I think for all of the reasons that we cited today, all of them, you may get for all of those reasons, you get an understanding of why I think this is the most extraordinary book in the Bible. We don't have stories like this of people just being nice to each other and recognizing when something nice is done and acknowledging it and thanking them. And because those nice things were done, more nice things are being done for them. And by the way, for the men who are on this call too, here's a story that we end off with of Boaz, who's this Prince Charming, right? As much as we have here a female character who we fall in love with, are the women on this call in love with Boaz too? Don't you just love Boaz? Of course, a woman as wonderful as Ruth gets a guy as wonderful as Boaz. And Boaz, too, is not young and handsome. He has money. Okay, fine. But what's being highlighted here about Boaz? He's a good guy. It's not that he's wealthy. It's that he's recompensing somebody for being good. And That's why we love him as much as we love Ruth. So do me a favor and stay with me for next week. Even though we had Zoom bombing at the beginning of this class, we're going to see what extra measures we can take. I think part of what we might do is make the password secret. So I'll let you know. There are ways that we can make the class more secure. I just can't believe that people are such losers and have nothing better to do with their time than to bomb a class on the Bible. And maybe one of the best things that, and I hope actually there are a few that stayed with us on the call so they could learn what Jews are learning about being kind to one another instead of wasting your time with hateful stuff. So I apologize for that. I really do. It's one of the weaknesses of Zoom bombing, and it's happened, unfortunately. It happened at Morning Minyan this morning and a number of other synagogues. But I think there are ways that we can address it by taking some more steps to be secure. We'll get to that before next class. Happy Victoria Day. May we focus today on, I think, a day on strong women who look out for one another, and that we can all be proud to say are part of our heritage. Take care. Until next time.